What's up, my Vikings? It's Dev. And Ziggy, he's down here. We're from SB Magic Talk. And you know what? Fun one today because Kaldheim drops on Arena tomorrow as I record this. Thursday the 28th of January, and it ships in paper next week. And as I speak, right now, a bunch of people on Twitch are streaming with the brand new cards in the early access event, which I might not get to play in, although I'd like to. Wizards of the Coast, but I still have an important function to carry out here. Today we're going to talk about the top 20 cards in Kaldheim. Now, as always, as I pet Ziggy here, remember to like the video, but I'm not going to spend too much time on self-promotion here. I got a lot to talk about, so I'm going to go ahead and get into it with some mentions that are somewhat honorable, but still didn't necessarily make the list. And there's some good stuff in the HMs this time around, like Pathways. You know, as usual, I don't really like to put like the dual lands or the tricolored lands on the list, even though they're obviously going to affect Standard a lot. And God, Ziggy, you're so cute. And Pathways are no different, even though these are probably some of the cards that will affect Standard the most out of any cards in the entire set. You know, like now Golgari Adventures is a little bit more playable. Some sort of Rakdos aggro deck might be playable. Maybe you can splash certain colors more easily in 3-color decks. I mean, Pathways are just really, really powerful dual lands that are very important for Standard play and will really shake up the environment just on their own, but they're also just kind of boring. I don't want to take up a spot on the list with Pathways because they might legit be in the top 3. But aside from that, we got stuff like Battle Mammoth, which just looks like a big green 5-drop beater that probably doesn't do much before it gets Heartless acted. But if it does get Heartless acted, it draws you a card. And if they have to deal with literally any of your other dudes while the big elephant's out, then you get to draw cards off of that. So, like, maybe it's okay, and I've got my eye on it, but it's not necessarily the card I'm most excited about in this set. It's just a card that I think might be a little bit kind of a sleeper, but we'll have to see. The only other honorable mention this time around is Rally the Ranks, a card that I'm legitimately excited about, but I'm not really sure how powerful it's going to be in Standard. That said, in Commander and, I guess, Brawl, probably a good card. And I'm always going to like cards like this that, again, whether you're playing formats like Commander or formats like Standard, let you play with basically any creature type that you want. I love cards like this, and an Anthem effect for just 2 mana is a great call. So this is one of my favorite cards in the set, but I'm not sure how important it's actually going to be in competitive play. Let's go ahead and get to the list here with a card that was almost an honorable mention, but I just really like Magda, Brazen Outlaw. This was almost Bergie. I couldn't pick like which Red Legend I liked more, and Bergie's really, really cool. I like that first line of text on Bergie is one of the best lines of text in the entire set, but in the end, I think I like the utility of a card like Magda a little bit more, right? Sometimes it's just going to die to like a removal spell or, you know, just a small creature that it's forced to block for whatever reason. For the most part, this is a serviceable 2-drop that has at least decent stats and generates mana for you. I think in a lot of ways it's a lot better than a card like Captain Lannery Storm. Although Lannery Storm could generate value the turn she entered the battlefield, this necessarily doesn't do that, but it at least gets you the treasure on the same turn Captain Lannery would, and it works with all other dwarves you might have out, so it's kind of a tribal lord in that way. Once you have a bunch of treasures, you just go get whatever artifact you want, which is really, really good too. So there's just so much to the card, whether it's your commander, whether you're building historic dwarves, or whether you just want a 2-drop that kind of ramps you in a standard, you know, big red deck or something like that, a red deck wins type card. And yeah, you might counter by saying she's not even the best card in Standard with the word brazen in her name, and she's objectively not, but I still think she's one of the more intriguing cards in the set, and she's one of those cards that I keep coming back to when I look through the set. So I just kind of wanted to honor her with the number 20 spot here. Now at number 19, let's talk about a real OG. I hope this joke translates well, because Old Grow Troll is the card that I'm trying desperately to craft a joke around here. Old Crow Troll looks really, really good to me. Just a 3-mana 4/4 is already decent stats. And even though you might argue Yorvo is a better card than this, and it already doesn't see too much play right now, though it does see sparing play, I would say that I would probably rather have 2 4/4s over time on the same card than I would a 4/4 that grows over the course of the game. You know, if Yorvo dies to a removal spell or a sweeper or something, it's just kind of gone forever. But if they play Shatter the Sky or Doomscar or some other sweeper while you've got OGT out, then you can just get another 4/4 later. And in the meantime, you've got ramp. And one thing that I really like about this creature is that it's not just a creature that can come out of the graveyard later. Something like King Narfi, for instance, a card that people like, and so do I. But with King Narfi, they can just clean to dust it out of your graveyard, Scavenging Ooze it out of your graveyard, play like a Grafdigger's Cage to where you can't reanimate it later or something like that. But with this card, it gets around kind of all of those things that take you off of reanimating recursible creatures. So I think that's a cool angle to the card that's actually going to matter in a bunch of different matchups. So it's a cool card, but at the same time, end of the day, it's just kind of a 3-mana 4/4, right? Even though you get it twice and you can ramp a little bit with it, it's still just, there are cards that do more impressive things. So on to those, but this is a cool Magic card. Now for number 18, we're going to go from 3-mana 4/4, which is decent, to 3-mana free removal spell, which is unbelievable. Let's talk about Tundra Fumarole, which probably isn't going to end up on too many people's like best cards in the set list, but I am really excited to play with this in like a big red deck, or the big Rakdos deck, which is still a thing, especially now more than ever, I promise you. Maybe we'll talk about why a little bit later, but I really like Fumarole in like a big red snow deck or something, even if it's the only snow card, because red didn't get a whole lot of snow love in this set, but even though it didn't, it still, I think, got one of the best snow cards, period, in the entire set in Fumarole, because you can follow this up with like a Maze Mind Tome, or maybe a Maze Mind Tome activation if you played Tome on 2. You can follow this up with a Skyclave Relic and then play like a 1-mana removal spell or a 1-mana creature after that. Really good turn 3, so there's just a lot you can do with this. Starting on turn 4, it gets even better, because on turn 4, if you drop another red source or a snow source or something, you pay 3 mana for this. All of it's snow. You get 3 mana back, and you still have a red mana, so you can cast this for free and still cast a 4-drop that costs 1 red on turn 4. That's unbelievable. You know, on turn 5, you can play this, get your 3 free mana, and then play like a Goldspan Dragon. That's unbelievable that you can effectively fit this spell in for free, especially in sort of the mid-game turns. So I think Tundra Fumarole is one of the most underrated cards in the entire set, but it doesn't go on my sleepers list. I think it's so obviously good that it just goes on my normal list. By the way, you can catch a sleepers list. Did it the other day. Link in the description. Check that out. But this card's good. It's the gist of what I'm saying. Also, taught me a new word. Had no idea what a fumarole was before this, but I guess it's a fiery blast of some kind. Probably should have looked it up before the video so I don't look dumb. But anyway, cool word, fumarole. Anyway, what's 17? Oh yeah, number 17 is Tyvarkell right here. And first of all, I'm happy that I get to call a card Kel Mitchell again. It's been so long since Knight of the Ebon Legion was in the format, whose initials are Kel, in case you never got that joke. I got asked about that joke so many times. Like, why do you call that card Kel? Knight, the Ebon Legion, Kel. But anyway, this card, the joke is so much more obvious, which I'm happy about. But it's also a Planeswalker for elves, which I guess Commander players might be happy about. Or upset about? I don't know sometimes. But anyway, I know that Planeswalkers aren't the best thing in the world in Commander, but Historic Elves is actually a really strong deck, and I think this card makes it a little bit stronger. And in Standard, this is the entire payoff for an Elves deck, so I guess if we're going to do, aside from maybe Herald Unites the Elves, which we'll talk about later, that's a really good card. But it might even be a better Elves 4-drop than this is. But this is still one of my favorite, Planeswalkers in the entire set. Not every Planeswalker made the list, but Tyvar did. Making sure for a fact that all your Elves tap for mana is good, because so many Elves in Standard don't. So making all your Elves into actual Elves. It's pretty sweet. And some of the other abilities on this are really cool. Just making an elf every turn I really like. And obviously the ultimate is ridiculous, but you have to get there by doing a lot of +1ing that I don't much care for. But I still think the card is a really cool Planeswalker. Anytime you create creatures that tap for mana, for 0 mana, that's a good ability. Number 16 is a card that I thought would be like way higher up on my list when I first saw it, but I've since cooled a little bit on Cosima, but not entirely. Obviously, the card still made the list, and I think it's much better than I think it's better than the free removal spell. I think it's better than a decent Planeswalker, so that should tell you a little bit. I still like this card a lot, but again, you have to pay 3 mana on turn 3. Let me go over the cons first. Pay 3 mana on turn 3 to get a blocker that turn, and then exile it on your next turn. So, is that the best use of your turn 3 in this format right now? Is it the best use of your turn 4 to get rid of the thing you played on turn 3? I'm not entirely sure, but obviously control decks really look like they might like a card like this. It gets around the legend rule even more than some of the other gods in the format do. Not only because, it's got an artifact on the other side, but because you can have multiple of them in exile. You can have one in exile and one in play if you want to. So, and then if your opponent kills the one in play, they have to deal with the one in exile after you drop a land. They have to deal with the one in exile, drawing you a buttload of cards when it comes into play and being even bigger than the one they killed. So it's got, again, built-in Heartless Act protection. That's pretty cool. There's a lot of really sweet stuff about Cosima, and I like the idea of, playing Cosima on 3, and then on turn 4 you play a sweeper, or maybe on turn 5 you play a sweeper, and then turn 6 drop your land, put Cosima into play, draw 2 or 3 cards, and have a big creature. Like, there's a lot of obvious things you can do with this, but I'm still not too sure how good the card actually is, because it doesn't actually provide too much value the turn at ETBs. The vehicle half is a little bit lackluster. A lot of people compare it to Smuggler's Copter, but it doesn't have any evasion. It doesn't really draw you a card. It just maybe gets you a land, and it might not even do that. So, I do think, though, that the card is really good with, like, Fabled Passage, It gets it extra counters, draws your extra cards and stuff. You can keep a Fabled Passage kind of cocked and loaded for if you want to bring Cosima out. There's a lot of awesome stuff you can do with Cosima. So I'm excited about the card, but I've kind of tempered my expectations since I first read it, but it's still easily one of my favorite cards in the set. And if you can engineer a late game turn where this comes into play, is a 5 or 6 power dude and draws you 3 or 4 cards, that's an unbelievable refill. And even if your opponent has the removal for Cosima at that point, you still have a grip full of cards. So what are they really going to do about that? Now, number 15 is a card that I've actually, kind of the opposite of Cosima. I've started to like this card a lot more in the last week since I've been thinking about it than I did when I first read it, and that's Voron Klex. Now, this costs 6 freaking mana, which is still, that was my number one complaint about it, is that it costs so much, and you're probably not really going to get any value out of it the turn at ETBs. So how good is this actually, especially in a format like Standard, where there's Heartless Act and counter spells, and I wasn't too sure about it, and I'm still obviously not, if you can't tell, but there are some cool things you can do with it. It's not obviously in Commander. I think that just the playability of this card in Commander gives it a pretty high spot on this list. But even in Standard and Historic, where you can ramp it into play pretty easily, and there's even an enchantment in the set that allows you to play this card relatively early in the game for free and then have all your mana open to you, so you can cast, Planeswalker on that turn and double the number of loyalty counters on it. It's just very silly. The card does lend to some very, very stupid lines in Standard. It'd be even stupider if cards like Fires of Invention were still, available to us. Sadly, they're not. Can you imagine Standard with Fires of Invention still legal to play? But anyway, even without Fires, I think this card has a lot of really cool things it can do if you cheat it into play and still have mana to spend on a Walker, or something that gets a bunch of X, +1/+1 counters when it comes into play. Then suddenly this card is explosive. If you follow this up with like a Stone Coil Serpent for however much mana you have, obviously things get out of control very, very quickly. So I love Voron Klex. I'm really hoping to do broken stuff with this, but I think it has to do broken stuff in order to be good enough to be on this list whatsoever. But I guess my expectation is that it will do those broken things. But we'll have to wait and see. Obviously, 6 mana is a lot, and even the decks that want to cheat it into play have a lot of setting up to do. Now, at number 14, we got a card that's pretty much only here for Commander playability, although maybe it does some stuff. Maybe it does some stuff in Standard and Historic, but I think Pyre of Heroes is just slightly too slow for competitive play. They may have fixed Birthing Pod too much, but it's still kind of a Birthing Pod any deck can play, and there's obviously a fair number of tribal decks in the upcoming Standard we're all going to try, whether it's Berserkers or Elves or Angels, which looks like it's going to be the first deck tech of the season via the Patreons. But in any case, any tribal deck in Standard might want to try this out, but I again am a little bit more excited about it for Commander shenanigans. It's a sacrifice outlet, it's a tutor, it puts the thing straight onto the battlefield, it can scale up every turn, sacrifice the thing you just went and got to get something even bigger. So, with untap effects, it works really, really well. It works awesome in like Aristocrats decks. That might be the deck that I want to try it out the most in Standard is Clerics, because Clerics has a lot of ways of bringing creatures back from the graveyard, sacrifice something to Pyre of Heroes, with, say, an Aura in play, and suddenly things get really, really interesting. So there's a lot of places I want to try Pyre of Heroes, even though I think it's a little bit too slow. But in terms of Commander play, I think this is probably going to be a card that sees play until pretty much the end of time, so I'm going to put it on my list. Now, at number 13, Egon, baby, and the Throne. Watch the Throne. It's not a bad album, and it's not a bad card either. If you happen to start the game with 2 Egons, or maybe you have an Egon and a Kroxa in your opening hand, they don't play too nicely together, so go ahead and play Throne and start fueling that Kroxa escape for later in the game. I think Throne is actually a good card and one of the better self-mill options in the entire format, so that's pretty good, but I think I like Egon a little bit more. This is kind of a rotting Reggie who I have very fond memories of. extremely fond memories. But, this is just going to be unbelievable. You play it on turn 3, and then on turn 4, you Great Hinge, right? Even after Lovestruck Beast is out of the form. Well, I guess when Lovestruck Beast rotates, so does the Great Hinge. But, if you're not... if you're playing all 4 Lovestruck Beasts and you didn't get any in your opening hand, if you're just not playing Lovestruck Beast in your deck at all because you have more of a self-mill theme because you're playing Egon, then this takes the place of your Lovestruck Beast on turn 3. And on turn 4, you get that Hinge. And I think that's going to be one of the most important turn sequences in Standard for Golgari decks at the very least coming up. I think Egon's going to be a very popular card in those decks. And if not Golgari, those decks might also just be Jund. Maybe we get a Jund self-mill. I know I'm getting ahead of myself here, but I just think Egon is too powerful of a card not to see some play. Even if this never gets to attack, it's still a brick wall on turn 3 that blocks any Lovestruck Beasts and kills them and everything else in between, right? When it does die, it draws you an extra card. So that's sweet. Even if you can't fuel it, drawing that card is going to be really nice. So, especially considering it's going to draw you a card when you have all your mana open. So that's also a very nice thing for it to do. I like an awful lot about Egon. It wears an Ember Cleave extremely well. Obviously, creatures with Death Touch, Double Strike, and Trample are ridiculous because they only have to deal 1 damage to the creature that's blocking them. So this is pretty much going to get through for, holy crap, 6, 7, 14, 13. This gets through for 13 damage pretty much every time, which is nuts when you put a cleave on it. So Egon just has so many cool things to do and so much support with cards like Mire Trident, Timid Calls the Dead, and all kinds of self-mill options. So I just don't see a world where this doesn't see some amount of play. Did I actually get through all of Egon without making a Ghostbusters joke? I'm pretty sure that's the first time a YouTuber's done that. But let's get on to number 12, which is another one of these gods, actually. This one, Yorn. And this is me giving Yorn a chance, everybody. I haven't exactly been very kind to Yorn, but that's because the day this god spoiled, everyone was losing their minds over this card. And I still don't think it's as good as a lot of people have made it out to be. But I do like a lot about the card, and in a very specific case of blasphemy, I actually think I like the Rhyme Staff half of it more than I like the 3-mana 3/3 that might sort of get you 2 untap steps, but not necessarily double your mana or anything. You just play a 4-drop, and then you sling with it and untap your lands, you get another 4-drop, and that sounds really good, and it could happen sometimes, and when it does happen, it probably is quite good. But you guys know that I'm not a huge fan of creatures that don't do much when they ETB, aren't especially good for their rate, give your opponent a whole turn to kill them, right? So there are still some issues I have with the Yorn half of this card. When it pops off, it's going to be really good, but we've seen creatures with removal spells stapled to them, right? We've seen snow sorceries. Well, I guess this only gets back permanents, but this gets back lands. This gets back Yorn himself. When he dies, if you get a second copy, you just tap this to bring back Yorn, thus mitigating the fact that he dies to removal quite a bit. So, this works really well with its own god if you happen to get a second copy. I don't think it's going to happen as often as you want it to, but it is still important to point out. Just being able to bring back any snow creature that you want is kind of an unbelievable ability. So both halves of this card look good to me. I'm just not sure that either half is good enough to be one of the best cards in Standard and be as broken as a lot of people think it's going to be. It's not going to be in my top 5 or anything, but it is still a card that I'm really interested in experimenting with, and is probably the best card in the Snow deck. Now, number 11 is kind of an honorable mention for the top 10 as usual, and this time it's Quakebringer. And I've seen some people poo-pooing this card, some people that I respect, but I actually still think the card is going to do a fair amount of work in Standard. This is great against rogues, or it will be some of the time, so that's pretty sweet. And it works really well in those same Rakdos or Jund self-mill decks I was talking about earlier, with Mire Trident, Timid Calls the Dead, and any other self-mill stuff that you might have. Quakebringer is unbelievable because if it mills itself into the graveyard, and you have, say, another Quakebringer out, or a Bone Crusher Giant, which is currently one of the best cards in Standard, and you should probably run it if you're playing red anyway, or, if you have a Calamity Bear, literally any other giant out, then this is going to start dealing a fair amount of damage every turn. If you've ever dealt with a Clothis on the other side of the table, you know how annoying that extra damage can be every turn. Sometimes with Clothis, the most annoying parts are the fact that it's scavenging oozes a thing out of the yard every turn, that it gains life. But this doesn't do those things, but it does keep a steady amount of pressure on the opponent, especially if you can mill multiple of them into the yard. If your opponent deals with your 5/4, they still have to kind of deal with your 5/4 as long as it's still in your graveyard. You know, while it's in your yard, you can reanimate it if you want to, but if you don't reanimate it, it just sits there and keeps doing damage. If you have, 3 or 4 of these in your yard, you're just going to kill your opponent without even having to attack within a couple of turn cycles. So even with the caveat of having to have a giant in play for the ability to pop off while it's in the yard, I still think this is a really good Magic card that's pushed to the moon. It's got Foretell, so it can be your 4-drop. It's, good even when your opponent deals with it. It's especially good in multiples. It's decent in the Giants deck, but it's good outside of that deck. It's good in the Rakdos deck. It's good in, again, just big creature decks. It's good against a specific deck in the format right now. So I think the card has been pushed in enough ways that it's kind of destined for some amount of standard play. Now, there might be better 5-drops, and we're going to talk about one a little bit later in this video. So I'm not sure how good the card's going to be overall, but I still think that this card is going to see some play at some point in its standard life cycle, especially if Rogues is still an important deck. Now, number 10, we're going to look at the best angel and the best elf in the set. And that's Realmwalker, baby. It's a really good card. Again, commander playability really helps out here, but this is great in Historic, where it hits off of Collected Company, so keep that in mind. It's really good in any tribal decks in Historic, and it's really good in any tribal decks in Standard. This is what's making me think that I want that Angels deck in Standard to be 3 colors. You play Abzan Angels just so you get Realmwalker as a 2-drop. You also get a 2-drop Changeling creature, which is kind of important for Angels if you do Abzan, but this is even better because it gives you a card advantage engine in a deck that normally wouldn't have any of that. So, it's probably really good in the Elves deck in Standard because, again, it's just the best 3-drop elf and maybe the best elf, period. So just Realmwalker does work not only in Standard and Historic, but also in pretty much every Commander tribal deck that plays green from here into eternity. So it's got to be somewhere in this set review. And honestly, I think it is top 10 just because of all the different decks it's going to see play in. Now, at number 9, not my favorite god in this set, but at least my favorite god that's not so obviously ridiculously good, and that's Redane. Another card that I've come along on quite a bit because I didn't really love this card when I first read it, but the more I look at it, the more I think the second line of text on the creature half of it is unbelievable. The tax on things that cost 4 mana or more might actually be crazy. Good enough to make mono-white aggro decks or maybe the mono-white Maul of the Skyclaves deck a real contender finally, even though this costs a little bit of mana to cast either half of it, more than I'm comfortable with for the rate. Let me put it that way. I still think that tax on the creature half is just delightful. It also keeps your opponents off of playing snow stuff, which is kind of cool. I'm not sure how important it's going to be in Standard, but we'll have to wait and see. And the shield half does some interesting things against, all kinds of decks, especially aggro decks. So I'm not poo-pooing the shield half. If you've already got Redane out, or maybe just the shield is going to be a little bit more important than Redane at the current moment, then it's always good to have a little bit of versatility because versatility is strong. But mostly what I'm excited about here is the fact that once you play this on turn 3, especially if you're on the draw, you might be taking your opponent off of their most powerful plays for like 3 whole turns, and that seems really, really good in a deck that's trying to close the game quickly. So for mono-white aggro, a card like this looks unbelievable. Now for number 8, I'm going to cheat a little bit here, and I haven't cheated on this list at all yet, so you should be proud of me, but I'm going to cheat at some point, and I guess we'll use number 8 for that, because I'm just going to say about half of the sagas. It's probably closer to like a third of the sagas, but there's a bunch of these that I really like. I think it's Binding of the Old Gods. The green-black saga is probably the best-looking saga to me in this set. It goes really well in Yorion decks, but it goes really well in just, again, those aforementioned green-black or Jund decks. Abzan, it goes really well in. Imagine following this up with like an Elspeth Conquers Death. So there's some cool things I really like about this card. Especially when it comes to sort of mid-range or control strategies. But that's not it, There's also, Song of Frost or Battle of Frost and Fire, the Giants Sweeper saga. That looks unbelievable. Also looks very good in Yorion decks for what that's worth. There's a Boros saga that effectively draws you 4 cards in a way. It exiles the top 4, and then for the next couple of turns you can play those cards. Again, unbelievable in Yorion. Elves gets a really good one called Herald Unites the Elves. That card looks unbelievable for a saga, especially the first chapter. So, and there are even more sagas to talk about. In the Sleepers video, I talked about Furha's Retribution, another really powerful looking saga from the set, but that's not all of them. There's a lot of sagas in this set that look unbelievable to me. But for number 7, you know how much I like removal on a body. I like removal. I like bodies. You jam them together. It's peanut butter and ladies. So let's talk about Sigrid, God Favored, who I am really having to like deny myself making this like one of the top 3 cards in the set. I just think a card like this looks so crazy. Just in my eyes, you get like a Fiend Hunter, Skyclave Apparition, that kind of card. But it's instant speed. And yeah, it's a little bit restricted to like attackers and blockers or whatever, but it still looks really, really good to me. These kind of effects on a body are always playable. We've already seen this playable on Skyclave Apparition in this format. And a card that allows you to do that at instant speed just looks like... I don't even know why they printed it. You know what I mean? It just looks that good to me. And I may be way like overestimating it, especially considering that the caveat on actually getting to target a thing with it is a little restrictive. You know, not everything that you care about participates in combat. So let's put it that way. But I still think that the card looks, on its face, just crazy to me. It's a removal spell on a body at instant speed. And those are that's the intersection of all the things I like about a Magic card. Now, number 6, won't be the last time I do this in this video, and it probably isn't the first time either, but I'm really going to put myself out on a limb here and say that my number 6 is In Search of Greatness. A lot of people have been talking about this one. Is it good? Is it bad? Is it whatever? I think I'm gonna go ahead and go on record saying the card's good. It could be a total dud, but free mana is always sweet, even if exactly the right things have to go correctly. Free mana is still pretty good. You could call this a fixed Fires of Invention, or maybe just a better Fires if everything goes right. It's not a better Fires, but at least it's a Fires that only costs 2 mana. And people are already cooking up stuff you can do with it. You know, I mentioned Voron Klex earlier. The In Search of Greatness deck wants to be able to cast its Voron Klex for free by having a 5-drop out. And then you've cast your Voron Klex out of your hand for free. That leaves all your mana open so you can cast, I don't know, a Garruk for 6 mana and double the amount of counters on it. That seems all right. You know, or just any Planeswalker that you might play that turn. You get, you know, extra loyalty counters on it and make it go ahead and ultimate or something in a turn or two. So that just, it's a really fun looking combo, and I'm interested in sort of the green-black or green-black X Super Friends deck with In Search. But there's also the Prismatic Bridge deck, the 5-color Esika deck that'll play, you know, Kinnan on turn 2, Esika on turn 3. Go ahead and immediately tap your Kinnan for 2 mana, because you can do that now, and play In Search of Greatness. And then on turn 4, you get a free 4-drop, maybe, what's her name, Corvoldi or Torvoldi? The 4-drop that gets, you know, a boost when you have extra legends in play. You can tap her to search for a creature or something. The top 6. So that seems really good, and then you have all your mana open to you. As a matter of fact, yeah, if you play Keenan on 2, and then turn 3 you have Esika, tap Keenan for In Search of Greatness, then on turn 4 you get a free 4-drop, and you can tap your creatures for lands for up to 8 mana. So that seems good enough to me, honestly. I think that this card could do a whole bunch of work in Standard. I've already outlined 2 decks people want to play it in, but there are certainly going to be more, especially within its life cycle, that you know, that could be available to it. You know, once we get a full Standard format that has all the sets in it, then this card just could potentially be really good, depending on what support it gets. But I think it might be good enough to be one of the better cards in the format right now. So, you know, whether it's a dud or not, we're going to be trying to do janky stuff with it on stream, but I'm pretty sure it's a very powerful card. Now, my number 5 is Goldspan Dragon, which is a lot of people's number 1, which I totally understand. Like, just about any card I talk about from here on out could be the number 1 card in the set. And Goldspan Dragon is no different. You know, just how powerful does this stupid thing look? 5 mana is a pretty high upfront investment, but at least it has haste, and a 4/4 flying haste isn't necessarily like super easy to deal with or anything. But if your opponent does have mana open and a Heartless Act to deal with this, you still get a treasure token out of it. You kill your Goldspan Dragon, but you got mana from it. And a cool thing about this is, let's say you have Counterspell backup in your hand, like a 2-mana Counterspell, a Negate or something like that. Then when you play Goldspan Dragon, your opponent will target it with a Heartless Act. You get a treasure token before the Heartless Act resolves. You can pop that treasure token for 2 mana and cast your 2-mana Counterspell on the Heartless Act. So, like, this goes ahead and protects itself in some ways, which is really, really interesting. It pays back the mana that you played to cast it. You know, like, if your opponent only has sorcery speed removal or something like Bloodchief's Thirst, for instance, then you'll play Goldspan Dragon, attack with it, get your 4 damage in the face, get your treasure token. Your opponent will go tap 4 of their mana to cast Bloodchief's Thirst on it and pay you another treasure token. So, it just pretty much always pays back a ton of mana, whether it's attacking or getting targeted by something. It's just an unbelievable looking card to me. A 5-drop, 4/4 flying haste is good enough on its own. And when it does, it wouldn't be standard playable on its own, but when it generates this kind of mana, it's unbelievable, especially when you have cards like Egon in the format that the big red deck is trying to play. You have cards like Tibble that we're going to be trying to play in the format, and this kind of ramp that bridges the gap in the mid game is just really good. Your opponent's going to try to deal with it, and then by the time they dealt with it, well, can they deal with your 7 or 8 drop that the mana that's produced helped you get to? It's just an unbelievable looking card to me, and I know I keep using that word, but Goldspan is just so obviously one of the slam dunk cards in this set that I'm pretty safe putting it in the top 5 and calling it unbelievable, because I think it's going to shape some things about the standard environment for the next year at least. But at number 4 is a 5-drop I like even more, and that's Kaia the Inexorable, my favorite Planeswalker in the set. This is easily the best version of Kaia that we've ever seen, which is kind of a low-ish bar, although the 3-mana one was really good. But I like this one a bunch, even outside of a Yorion deck, even though obviously it goes really well in a Yorion deck. So you can blink creatures for value, but even outside of that deck, this does really good work with like a Skyclave Apparition or anything else with an ETB trigger. So I like the +1 ability, but obviously just being able to play it and immediately minus it to exile a thing is really, really good too. It kind of competes with Elspeth Conquers Death. ECD might have to rotate before this card sees any real play, but maybe it's just a one of alongside a 2 or 3 of ECD in the Orion decks. I could see this card doing some work. So I really like this. It can be reanimated with ECD, so it does work alongside ECD pretty well. So I don't think just the presence of Elspeth Conquers Death in the same slot keeps this card from seeing all the play in the world, but especially once Elspeth Conquers Death rotates, then Kaia can probably really shine. I just really like everything the card does. The ultimate is especially powerful, but what I really like about it is just being a 5-mana Planeswalker that exiles something and sticks around, because 5 mana is a pretty good rate for that ability. I know that I'm not really going ham, like talking about all the different decks Kaia goes in, all the different combos you can do with her like I have been with some of these other cards, but I just think this is one of those cards that's so obviously good on its face, in some ways just like Goldspan Dragon, that there's just not much you can say about it other than looking at it and being like, huh, good Magic card. Same thing's kind of true in number 3, which is yet another 5-drop that I like even more, but it's not really a 5-drop. Because we're talking about the Doomscar, baby. Here in the top 3, to break the top 3, it's Doomscar. And this is another one that could be a lot of people's like number 1 card in the entire set. And I do think this could shape Standard more than any other card in the set before it's all said and done. Decks like Gruul have unbelievable starts that a 4-mana sweeper like Shattered the Sky just isn't good enough against. But a 3-mana sweeper is unbelievable against. There's that word again. I have to stop. A 3-mana sweeper is just ridiculous against some of the starts that a Gruul deck or a mono-red aggro deck or the mono-white aggro deck that might be a thing now can get. I will say, too, that mono-white aggro is really good against a card like Doomscar if they get their Redane on turn 3, if they were on the play, because then that takes them off of Doomscar for a couple of turns. Could be an important interaction, but in any case, Doomscar, really good-looking card that the control decks needed really bad, because in this day and age, we talk about how Wizards is never going to reprint a card like Damnation because it's too good. Well, at this point, even though aggro isn't necessarily the most important deck in the format, a deck like Gruul has been given so many good starts that even a 4-mana sweeper isn't quite good enough. So having a 3-mana sweeper in the format is going to do wonders to slow the format down a step. Even though I might not be entirely jacked about that proposition, I sometimes like to turn creatures sideways. It's a thing I occasionally engage in. Doomscar makes that practice a little bit more frustrating, if not a lot more frustrating. I still don't think that it's, debatable that this is easily one of the most powerful cards in the set, period. And will still, outside of Standard and Historic, is probably going to make its way into many a Commander deck, too. Now, at number 2 is a card that was going to be number 1 for a really long time, but I've done something very risky. We'll get to it in a second, but number 2 is Valky and Tibble. Now, this could easily be the best card in the set, and I don't think this is going to be a bust. You know, a lot of people have been saying lately that this actually isn't as good as you think it is, and there is definitely a percentage chance that is the case. But most 2-drops don't do butt on turn 7, and most 7-drops don't do butt on turn 2, and this, it's not those things. It's a 2-drop that actually can be something on turn 7. And a 7-drop that can be something on turn 2. And I think that's just inherently powerful enough. But when the 2-drop is kind of a Kitesail freebooter that is kind of also a Lazav, it's a thing that you can turn into a creature that's way better than it. And imagine nabbing a Croxa, or in like an older format, you nab a Euro or something with this. Take it away from them as an option, and then you'll just have a Croxa or a Euro attacking on like the next turn. That seems really good to me from your 2-drop creature, right? And if you just get it in your opening hand, you don't have a whole bunch of lands or the ramp to get to your Tibble. It's a perfectly serviceable 2-drop that takes your opponent off of their plan a little bit. It's some interaction. I like the Valky half of it. I really do. But obviously the Tibble half is what we're all here for, and it's very easy to play in a standard with tons and tons of ramp. We're already trying to get to Egon in this standard, so a card that costs 1 less to Egon, not a problem. It's good index alongside Egon, because Egon's almost never going to wipe it off the board. It'll stay on the board alongside an Egon, and your opponent just scoops. But at the same time, if you have a Tibble in play, Egon's probably not going to wipe it. All right, unless they just wipe all 7 of the loyalty counters off of Egon to take care of your Tibble. And then in that case, you got rid of the Egon. So that's kind of good. But there's also, tons of treasure-based strategies in this set, alongside all the cultivates and migration paths that already existed. So I think Tibble is just going to be an instantly playable card in the format. He draws cards, he removes things, and then lets you play them later. He lets you play stuff out of like any graveyard eventually. He's just a really, really good looking card on both sides to me, and I love 2-drops that do a thing later, and I love 7-drops that do a thing early. And Tibble's just the best of both worlds, and I really don't think they could have juiced either half of the card to be more playable than they already have without the thing being broken. So just easily one of the best cards in the set, and I don't think that's arguable. But let's get to number 1, which is probably controversial, but like the more I read it, the more I read this card, the more I think, like, how do we not all universally recognize this as a crazy card, right? How have I not seen anybody talk about Glorious Protector? Not really. I mean, I thought about putting this on my sleepers list, but the more I think about it, the more I think, like, this is just Restoration Angel. It's not better than Resto, but it has the potential to be better than Resto because it can get any number of creatures off the table. This goes decently in Yorion decks, but especially once Yorion rotates. This thing is a house, Yorion costs 5 mana, and sometimes you have to buy it out of the companion slot. It costs you an extra 20 cards in your deck, so you're not going to draw your best cards at the right time. Glorious Protector doesn't have any of those problems, and it's not sorcery speed. You can play it during your opponent's combat step or something. Block, Glorious Protector, wipe those creatures that I blocked with off the table, and then if Glorious Protector dies, those creatures come back. Or if Glorious Protector leaves the battlefield. So you can do like Thassa tricks, just blink your Glorious Protector every turn and bring back, 2-3 different creatures every turn. That seems game ending. You can return it to your hand with a bounce effect. You can flicker or fade it. You can blink it in some way and just get this effect over and over. And that seems crazy to me. Multiple Glorious Protectors because they aren't legendary seems good. Obviously, you can't use one protector to exile another protector because it says non-angel creature. They realized what you wanted to do with it, and they said you can't do that. But it's still a really powerful card because it's got decent stats. It has evasion. It has flash, which is the most important part of the card. It's got a decent casting cost, but it's got an even better foretell cost if you've got a couple of mana early in the game to foretell it. There's just so many cool things you can do with it in a format where Skyclave Apparition is a playable Magic card. It's just so good. The card looks so freaking cheese delicious to me, and I just don't see why more people aren't talking about it. Again, it's not Resto. You don't immediately get the ETB trigger back on the creature, but there are a lot of ways you could immediately get it back, and there are a lot of ways you could get it back over and over by flickering or bouncing. There are a lot of ways that you could get, 2, 3, 4 creatures off the field at the same time and just get a mountain of value when your opponent is forced to kill your Resto. So I'm just going to call it Resto. If they were trying to fix Restoration Angel, I don't think they necessarily did the best job, is all I'm going to say. The card looks bonkers to me, and I'm going to go ahead and make it my number one, even though I know it's probably not something a lot of people are going to agree with. I think, because I know the criticism here, is that this has to leave the battlefield before you get the real value off of it. But I just don't think that's enough of a restriction to make up for the fact that they made it so much more powerful than Resto, given that it can target any number of creatures that you have. So I don't think that that's a good enough restriction to make up for the fact that it can target a bunch of dudes at the same time. The card just looks bananas, and I don't know why you don't see it. Of course, could be wrong. I've been wrong before, occasionally, many times. I've been right before too. Come on. But anyway, that's my list this entire time. The top 20 in Kaldheim. Just let me know anything I missed, because there's a bunch of cards that I wanted to talk about that I didn't get to talk about. So just because your favorite card didn't end up on the list, that doesn't mean I hate it. Let's start a conversation down there in the comments section. Maybe I really like your favorite card, even if it didn't make the list. I really like Bergie. I like Bergie so much, and it hurts my heart that she's not on this list, because I love me some Bergies, and I hope that card shakes. But anyway, that's all I got for this one. Just make sure you like the video. Now I'll take the time for self-promotion. Please don't click away. You love me. This is part of my job. So like the video, sub if you're new, because this is where all the real content comes in. Deck Techs coming up super duper soon. So you want to be part of the channel for that. Join the Strictly Squad, or whatever we're calling it this week, by just hitting the sub button, hit the bell for the notifications, so YouTube actually tells you when I put videos out. It should do that if you subscribe, but it doesn't. So it's a two-step process. I'm sorry it's like that. Sub and hit the bell for the noties. Or just sub to get those metrics up. That would help. Aside from that, you can pre-order any of the stuff on this list from TCG Player. First link in the description. Helps me out when you order cards through them. And it's almost maybe getting sort of close to time to play Paper Magic again, sort of maybe, so consider pre-ordering some of these if you want to. Aside from that, if you really want to help the channel out, Patreon is the way to do it. Patreon.com/SPMTG. $1 a month is all I ask. You can vote on what decks we do first in Kaldheim Standard. Aside from that, you can watch me play Magic on Twitch, which I'll be doing an awful lot of in the next few months here as we discover some Kaldheim tech. So that's twitch.tv/SPMTGdev. Link in the description. Following me there costs nothing, and I'm trying to get my metrics up. I'm over 3,000 subs, 3,000 followers, so I appreciate that. But help us get to 5K. Check out me, play some Magic. We have a lot of fun on Twitch. I'm really bad at self-promotion. Anyway, watch me play some Magic. We have a lot of fun. If you're one of the chat squad, then you know what we're talking. We have all the fun in the world. It's a tight-knit community over there. I have the best community in the world. And Twitch, I think, proves that. Watch me play some Magic. But anyway, aside from that, I'm done. Yeah, that's all the things. So I hope you enjoyed the top 25. Let me know if you have anything to dispute down there in the comments section, and I will catch you cats later. I'm Deb from the Place. Thanks for watching, my wizards. Spread love and be kind.